Welcome to the Warships Podcast with your host, Kellorn, Venacera, and Arun.
Hello and welcome to episode 91 of the Warships Podcast. Joining us today, all the way from his new home in St. Petersburg, is friend of the podcast, Earl Grey himself. I'm your host, Kellorn, and Venacera and Arun are here with me today as we have a huge list of topics associated with patch 0.7.6. But before we get into that, welcome back to the show, Grey.
An absolute pleasure to be back, sir. Wonderful to be in the swing of things.
So the last time you were on the show, you announced that you had been offered and accepted a job in St. Petersburg working for Wargaming. I know, unfortunately, that things didn't quite work out for you to make it there before the CC Summit, so I didn't get the chance to meet you, which I really was looking forward to. But that said, can you give us an idea of the road you had to walk before you could even start your job?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a bit of a saga, and I wasn't the only one who experienced the frustrations because, of course, the guys here were waiting for me to come across and do my thing and help them out with their workload. So it's frustrating for both of us, but it entailed physically going to London to the visa centre where you had to obviously submit your forms, do your fingerprints and everything. And there was a change in the law. So then it wasn't acceptable to have an emailed copy of your passport to give to the immigration centre. It actually had to be a notarized copy that then had to be legalized by the British government and then sent across by snail mail all the way to St. Petersburg. That took a month in itself, just the postal system. And then once I got issued my invitation, I followed instructions, went to London to be told that actually I needed more than that. I needed to apply for another visa and then to also get a HIV test certificate on top. So I had to then go to the doctors and get all that rigmarole. And this there were little like hurdles that were not anyone's fault, but just thrown down by each weird sort of random occurrence or event. So that's what dragged it all out, unfortunately.
So was it on the Russian side more, government side, or the British government side more that were giving you trouble, or was it kind of both?
It was really the logistics of the postal system, which are insanely slow, because I used Royal Mail, who assured me it would take 5 to 7 days, but they didn't factor in the Russian postal system, which is notorious for just being super slow. Had I used someone like DHL or UPS, then perhaps it would have been a lot quicker. But we in the UK, I don't think DHL, unless it's for businesses, really do just documents. They do parcels, that's no problem, but for just letters, generally it's the Royal Mail, and you tend to get like an international certified service. So it's stuff that is kind of unknown. I think I was also perhaps a bit of a learning and a test bed for the HR girls, so it was a conflagration and a mishmash of unforeseen events and changes of laws, which of course their lawyers had to catch up with and get to grips with.
So that you heard it here first, Arun. If you're going to apply, don't send your stuff via snail mail.
Well, I don't even live that far away, you know.
No, technically, I could get on a train and probably visit you, Arun. You're pretty close, aren't you?
Yeah, it would take a couple of hours.
Yep, if that. And I can hop into Helsinki, Finland. There's a railway station that goes straight there.
Oh, sounds like it's a pretty cool place to be. So what exactly does your job entail now?
Wow, I had struggles with this with Sub Octavian. I was like, right, so what does the job actually mean? What am I going to be doing? And it's managing the network globally of community contributors, and that's accurate. That is what it is. But of course, as with any job, as I knew from the beginning, you can have your job description, but beneath it, all the nitty gritty and the cogs that go into that job are going to be far more wide-ranging. So I am responsible for keeping tabs with some of the pipeline with the upcoming patches, because of course I need to credit you guys, community contributors, with your test ships. So I'm now the little monkey,
which we got this morning. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And that was indeed me bashing on my keyboard here in St. Petersburg. So I will be crediting those ships, and then it will be myself who then informs you and updates you. I am in charge of the Dev Q&A channel in the Discord, so any of you community contributors with any questions you have whatsoever, if I can't answer it immediately, I am right on hand in this office to physically talk to the very person who will most likely be enacting that change or who knows best about that specific query. So that is kind of the value and the role, and why the hell anyone ever bothered to hire an Englishman to come and work in Russia.
So I guess now that you're on the other side of the coin and you're actually physically close to the developers and not just the producers, like some of the people that we know in the North American office, what has been your experience about things that you thought might have been, back in the days when you were just a regular old community contributor, you'd say things like, that would just be an easy fix. What has been with your experiences and changes of perspectives since you've been there?
Yeah, to a degree, there has been some eye-opening, but I always sort of gave them the benefit of the doubt simply through life experience of doing various jobs. So something can look fairly simple on the outside, but when you really consider the amount of preparation that goes in to anything that you enjoy, there's usually a lot below the surface. And I'll, just given an example, a musician, you enjoy it. A master makes it look easy to play the piano or the guitar, and we all think we can do it. Oh, it'll just be easy, and if he messes up, oh well, he's messed up. But you don't see the hours of practice and preparation that go into that performance. So here, obviously, I'm in the factory where you guys are enjoying the end product, as I did, and behind that you've got pipelines, you've got concepts, you've got things that are in testing, and you guys are privy, as we've known for a long time now. We as community contributors have been privy to some stage of that testing, so we do have some idea of what goes in now to balancing. But of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And when it comes to game engines and coding, we've got whole offices of programmers, quality testers, so many layers of that onion to go through, that when you hear, it always made me smile before, and it does definitely make me smile now, to hear a streamer say, "Oh, why can't we change a keybind? It would be so easy." Well, the theory is, the practice you just can't know unless you are a programmer who is qualified and expert in that particular script or game engine to know the truth behind that statement.
Fair enough. So the Global Community Contributor Program was rolled out at the beginning of the year, and more of the features are being brought online. What were the original intentions for the program, and have they been met in your and Sub-Octavian's opinion?
I think Sub-Octavian, sort of in his previous group before my arrival, did some amazing work and made great strides in the right direction. I was seeing some initiatives, these giveaway crates that were recently enacted in the past couple of months. These were sorts of things we could have really used in the beginning, and we were kind of making do. I know I personally sort of funded that sort of thing, but through, I think, that receptiveness that's been adopted, it was often criticized that Wargaming weren't listening, or that was the perception across it. NA kind of had one perception of their office, and there was another one for EU. But I think what this initiative to centralize and globalize the contributor network has resulted in is far more of a dialogue between player and developer. And I think Wargaming, certainly Sub-Octavian and his department and his bosses, have realized the value in that relationship. It can't always be one-sided. You can't always give players what they want, and you can't always do what the company wants. So from what I've witnessed and seen so far, we're seeing a good effort to meet in the middle. You will know recently that, and it's public knowledge, and I hope you guys aren't shy of admitting it, but we're giving you guys 30 days or a month's premium on a rolling basis. So that was an initiative to aid you and assist you in your grinding out of trees, of taking away an expense that you would have had to have footed yourself, or your supporters would have helped pay for. Just little sort of quality of life initiatives and adjustments that can make a big difference.
So the CC program has recently undergone a massive increase in members. And I guess, what was the reasoning there to expand it so significantly, so quickly? And what are the new criteria that our new CCs are evaluated by if we have people who are interested in maybe becoming a CC themselves in the future?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yes, we have made a real push. I've personally been out there talking to people who perhaps don't quite make our grade. I'll start with that part of the question with regards to requirements. It currently exists that there was a forum thread and we've got plans to make even that process far more streamlined, far more accessible for people. The expansion is kind of recognizing people who already are creating content that meet the requirements that are, let's get it up so I don't get misquoted, but we've got some hard requirements that we like to look at, and that's kind of having 1,000+ subscribers, be it on YouTube or Twitch, or that a relative amount on other platforms. So it probably wouldn't be as stringent for this podcast or for Ship Comrade, for instance, or these fan sites and review sites. So there is some wiggle room there, but there's this sort of minimum level that you should have attained, and that will tell us that obviously your content's quality and it's gained a following and it's good quality stuff. We also want to see some regularity in contributions, so hopefully there'll be at least 12 and they'll be on a fairly regular basis, which of course then also indicates to us that the creator is somewhat committed to the game and the community as a whole.
So how did we get chosen in the first place? No, I'm kidding.
Well, and that's a good question. So it's people who are having a positive impact on the community, doing the community a service, be it sharing opinions or news and updates and that sort of having a good impact there. And with get on to the expansion really at this stage, I feel, is recognizing people who possibly weren't even aware that there was a contributor program, or, as I spoke to one chap today, was aware of it but didn't really have the self-belief or self-esteem that they were worthy or that they could bring much more to the table than the existing members. So that's been kind of the main focus. I guess the other side of it is we definitely want to reward those who are taking the time out of their lives and focusing their creativity on this game. It's obviously beneficial to Wargaming to adopt these people and support them, because more content is created on the game is more publicity. So that's a fair enough fact in and of itself. And anything we can do to help that is in both of our interests.
So the CC program is obviously still evolving. And I guess, where do you see the next steps of the program going, and how will that help with the overall how will that help the overall player base with the game through the CCs? And are there future events like the CC Summit being planned?
I believe I haven't actually spoken to Sub, but my understanding was that this CC Summit that was held in St. Petersburg would be an annual thing. The details of it, I don't know if it'll always be at St. Petersburg. It makes sense to bring you guys here to the factory to see all the procedures and all the operations that go on for your own understanding. It also helps us with our resources to do things like we did, showing you upcoming things in the game. The plans for the CC program, that's kind of partly my job as well. My job is to identify more of these sort of quality of life improvements. There's other things like events and things. I've got a few things in the pipeline, and the trouble is with these pipelines, when they are at the moment just concepts. I've only been here about a month, and Sub obviously had his own concepts, and these all need to go through rounds of assessing feasibility and return on investment, I guess you could say, for some of them that require investment. You do have, I think I can say this much in this sort of not intentionally evasive, but in this vague manner, that there will be a lot of community engagement and a lot more initiatives taking place in the next month even.
So we have seen a lot of kind of revolutionary changes in the CC program as the Global Community Contributor Program rolled out. Do you foresee the future as continuing kind of that, big, huge revolutionary changes, or do you think that you've gotten to the point where it'll just be minor tweaks and things and evolutionary changes that are kind of smaller in scale, but just support the ongoing maintenance of the program?
I think in the short term, yes, there may well be a few more revolutionary initiatives. There will also, of course, be some trials of initiatives, things that perhaps prove that they aren't of that great benefit. Perhaps those wide steps may sort of decrease, if you like, as we make these strides. Personally, I think Wargaming did a lot of catching up with certain aspects and initiatives. They've definitely surpassed that benchmark, if you like. And I think they're going above and beyond. If you look sort of to other partner programs or contributor programs, I don't know of any to date that are quite at the point that we're getting to, or are at even at this point. But it's yet to be seen. And of course, we depend on you guys, and I'm reliant on you guys telling me what you want and what helps you the most, and seeing how we can help each other.
Fair enough. Well, so overall, scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you that you moved to St. Petersburg and are in this job?
Absolutely, a good solid 10. It's been definitely an interesting life experience. It's like being 4 years old again, because there's people talking away. You go to a supermarket, all I can do is pick up items off the shelf, put them in my basket, plonk them down, say priet, hello, whatever, wait for the total to be rung up, read it, and then just say spasiba as I hand my money over. If I meet a friend, they've got to order my food for me in a restaurant. It's a bit of an eye opener, actually. I haven't found it scary. I've just found it a bit challenging, and if anything, it's more motivation to get my butt in gear and learn a new language.
Yeah, that is, and that's a difficult concept to be. I mean, I've been in foreign countries where I couldn't order the food either, and it gets scary at a certain point.
I get by with a cheeky smile and some sign language,
as all Englishmen do everywhere, right?
Absolutely.
So we're glad you joined us today, Gray, and we're glad that you're here to talk about patch 0.7.6 with us, which was released yesterday. But first up, the American Light Cruiser line is finally here. Dallas, Helena, Cleveland, Seattle, and Worcester make up the line. But before we delve into our other topics for the day, I want to spend a moment talking about our feelings on the light cruiser line and what ships are worth keeping or what ships maybe you want to skip. So, Vanessa, why don't you start us off? Because I know that you are really excited about this line in general and from the beginning.
Well, the light cruisers, we've tested them for a while, and Cleveland, a lot of us have experience with it. A lot of us have been playing it. A lot of us had our ideas on the changes that were kind of going on with it. And, we've given our opinions with those. Some of the other ones, like Worcester is crazy. I feel it's an amazing support ship, but it's rather difficult to just try and go in and solo play. Some people can really do it. But I found the best with these ships is when you actually went and, supported someone else. Even if you weren't on a division or, in voice chat or whatever, if you kind of went and picked a ship or a small group of ships or maybe another division and you know what, I'm just going to sail with them and kind of support them. I noticed I had a little bit more success, but again, I don't output as much damage as a lot of other people do just because of my style of play and how much I try and focus on the objective. So these ships they can be good and they can be really bad. I think if someone is out there just really trying to farm damage, you might be able to, but these are not ships for beginners. They have a steep learning curve. Dallas, I thought, was kind of ho-hum. Helena is such a fun ship, and I had a great time in it. It felt very much like old school Mogami, in a lot of ways, just so many guns and just a thrill to play. Cleveland, we've already talked about Cleveland, to death. Seattle, they did some improvements on it. I did like, the enhanced turning, and the rudder felt really good to play with, but it's still a really fragile ship. These are light cruisers, so they can get smacked around really easily. You don't have smoke like the British CLs to kind of hide or conceal. So there's some difficulty there. I tried testing some more, and I won some. I lost a lot. I really don't know how to make these ships work amazingly well, other than just to play as support and with other people. Worcester, again, we've played, or at least I've tested that ship extensively. And some of the most successes I had, I know I was playing with Business 6, and we had an amazing run with it, and just taking the support role and having fun with it.
I guess I didn't know that you were good friends with Business. That's cool that you play with him. One of the things that I found, and I think that Arun, you agree with me, is that these ships are not ships that have a huge amount of carry potential. And I think that they are interesting and can be fun ships, but they're not kind of like the bedrock that you build a team on. Arun, do you agree with that? And kind of where would you put these ships on your desirability to play, especially for a newer player?
Well, I don't really enjoy ships like this. I would say that they definitely have their, use, of course. They aren't weak ships, but I agree with you that they don't have the same carry potential. It depends on the game, of course, and it depends on your teammates and the opposing team, but I don't think that overall it gives you as many options as something like a battleship, because you can't decide to force something as a light cruiser compared to what a battleship or maybe even a heavy cruiser can, especially at the higher tiers, because you'll just get blown out of the water and there's very little you can do about it. If you want to deal a whole bunch of damage, then what you end up doing is usually using islands, maybe smoke screens that your allied destroyers give you, or British cruisers. And I feel like this means that you can't be the one that starts to push. You have to be following someone. And in a random battle, that, in my opinion, is not a nice position to be in, because chances are fairly good that some of the players on your team will decide to not be very aggressive. And as a light cruiser, there's very little you can do to change it. As a battleship, you can start to push, and other people sometimes follow, sometimes they don't, but you can still survive for at least some portion of time. As a light cruiser, you're probably more about area denial or defending a specific spot on the map rather than, doing anything more dynamic, I suppose. So I feel that it's a ship that newer players probably won't really enjoy as much, because they'll just get shot out of the water if they make a small mistake in positioning. And I wouldn't quite recommend it to them at first. However, if they run into problems as a destroyer player and see that, hey, these light cruisers with their radars, they are ruining my game, maybe they need to be nerfed. If they have ideas like this, then they should play it to find out, what the weaknesses are.
Gray, kind of how are the light cruisers being received around the office? I mean, do the devs and the people in the office there in St. Petersburg, do they feel like these are like really crazy ships that a lot of people have been anticipating for a while, or are they kind of like, this is just kind of the meat of our game and something that should be an option to play?
Well, what's actually been quite funny for me to witness is obviously, as opposed to the criticism that's often received, like Wargaming doesn't play its own game. I'm even looking at one of my colleagues now playing a ship at the moment, and I've gone up to them and said, "What are you doing?" And they're saying, "We're actually testing one of the CC's builds. We're sort of putting something that maybe they read on the Reddit or one of the social media feeds, and they'll go off and they'll try the different ways that maybe they hadn't thought of." I think they've been well received. Obviously, Worcester's got its own niche that it fulfills. We've been sort of picking up on the feedback I certainly have in the Discord of the range of opinions from you guys with like a mix-up. Dallas and Helena and the feedback on there. And it is stuff that is sort of fed back and fed on further up to the chains of commands that should things need to be changed. But I think on the most part, well received by the community, and I believe that the team are very happy with them.
I particularly, of the ships, the only one that I really find to be the fun for me anyway is Helena. I can play Helena all day. It's just at that tier, at tier 7 with 15 guns, it's just ridiculous. It's so much fun to play. The rest of them, I can probably pretty much take them or leave them. Even Cleveland, I don't really like her at tier 8. But Helena, I'll take that any day.
Why is the name Worcester? Why?
I think no, this is one we actually have an Englishman to answer, right? Right, Gray?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm not sure I really do have an answer. Just that back home, that's where you've got the Cester part. Obviously, is from the old sort of Roman naming of towns, of cities, and all this lot. And the Worcester. I don't know why. I think even as a kid, I might have pronounced Worcester as Worcester or Worcester. It's one of those weird things, but of course it went across the Atlantic over to America, where it then found itself cut and pasted over there, and the pronunciation is stuck, from what I'm told.
Everyone that I've met that actually is from that area insists that it's Worcester, so yeah. We'll just leave it right there because I don't think that there is a good reason. But speaking of new ships, the British destroyer line was unveiled this week on Facebook as the next major line to be added to World of Warships. In addition to that, we got word that Alaska is into development. The large cruiser from that had 12-inch guns from the United States. Something the player base has been asking for literally since the first public version of the game. It's early in the testing cycle for the British destroyers, so we'll wait to discuss them heavily until we have a chance to see a little bit more information and to test them ourselves. And it's way too early to talk about Alaska other than to be glad that she's coming. That said, I suspect a part of the development for Alaska will be whether she fits better at Tier 9 or Tier 10, as we have the Kronstadt and Stalingrad that are kind of fulfilling a very similar role in the game right now. Arun, do you have any kind of strong thoughts on, whether or not Alaska should be tier 9 or tier 10, and what might make her kind of unique compared to the Kronstadt and Stalingrad that are already a part of the game?
Well, obviously it will be unique because it's American, and American just means it's better, right?
America.
Yeah. Okay. So I would honestly like it if it were tier 10, just because of what the dev Q&A said about ranked and tier 9, and that people don't really keep their tier 9 ships. I would like the ship to be tier 10 in that case, because it means there will be more uses for it, basically. But I think it'll mostly come down to like the balance decisions. I don't think there's anything inherent that puts it at tier 10 or tier 9. So I would say that it's mostly up to the developers and where they, see that there is an opening rather than, or maybe not an opening, but where something is missing rather than, just putting it wherever they think is best.
Well, one of the interesting things is that, Kronstadt and Stalingrad both kind of got a little closer to what we might have expected from other Russian heavy cruisers. They have their radar and they have their kind of their gun heavy profile. Yet the U.S. Navy also has a gun heavy profile for its heavy cruisers and radar. It's just that they have kind of a high arc gun profile. And I don't know how that might, or even if it should translate to something like Alaska. Now, Vanessa, we've talked a little bit about Vanessa. You and I have talked about Alaska a little bit, even before we had any indication that it would be part of the game. Do you kind of have any ideas about what they might do here?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot. And I kind of think opposite of Arun. I would like to see it as a tier 9. And, part of the reasoning is, it's kind of really analogous to the Iowa class in many of its aspects. So I kind of would like to see it in that same, vein, if you will. And I also really like tier 9. So while the devs seem to have a different view, I would rather promote tier 9 more. And that's just kind of my opinion. I hope that, we are getting, in essence, it's a large cruiser. We classified it as a large cruiser. And I hope that we can see some slight differences or variations in gameplay. Now, is it going to be classified under a battleship icon or cruiser icon? I suspect it will be a cruiser icon, just like the Stalingrad and Kronstadt. And maybe, maybe we'll see some differences in the guns. I suspect, we'll probably get a high arc. And I suspect with the changes to radar, or the possible changes to radar, that maybe, Alaska could have a really longer duration or slightly longer duration of radar due to its gun reload, or I don't know, something to make it a little different than cruisers and battleships.
Now, Gray, I know you can't officially talk about Alaska other than to say that she's coming, but back when you were a player, I know that that Alaska was one of those things that got mentioned on your channel at least a few times. As a player, what would you kind of like to see from her?
She's an iconic ship, isn't she, for America? From what would I like to see from Alaska? I guess probably what we'd all like to see, something that embodies the spirit and the memory of that ship, and what she sort of brings to people's minds and therefore tries to bring to the game, because I'm kind of equating her to the sort of status of Hood. This is something that everyone's greatly anticipated, and they want something not gimmicky but unique, something that's special about her. If she's going to be up at these high tiers, be it 9 or 10, obviously she's going to need some characteristics and some utility up there. It's very hard for me to say, really, with Alaska. We all want these iconic ships, and as I say, especially up at the 10, sort of 9, 10, we want capable ships too.
I think that was one of the most exciting things for me about when they announced that Kronstadt and Stalingrad were going to be made at all, because as soon as they said that, I was like, okay, that removes the last barrier to us getting Alaska. And, Arun posted a great picture in our little chat here of Missouri next to Alaska, and they're so similar. And it would be so cool to have both of them in the game. But moving on, 2 podcasts ago, we discussed the legendary tier 10 upgrades and they'll be rolling out through missions that start unlocking tomorrow, Friday, June 29th. Before we talk about them one last time, there were some changes from the last time we talked about the upgrades, and I wanted to kind of go through those changes before we talk about them as a whole and how they're going to be rolled out. First, Hakuryu's fighter bonus hit points was dropped from 15% to 10%. Moskva had her upgrade moved from the 5th slot to the 6th slot. Hindenburg's fire duration was reduced from 50% to 40%. Montana had her fire duration reduction buffed from 10% to 15%, and flooding duration reduction increased from 10% to 30%. Yamato's reload bonus time was changed from 12% to 6%, making this a trade-off instead of a more of a trade-off than it was before. The Kurfürst's secondary firing rate bonus was increased from 10% to 15%. Republique had the traverse penalty decreased from 19% to 13%, and the range penalty increased from 16% to 24%. Yu Yang had the radar and smoked activation penalty decreased from 30% to 15%, and Z52 had the torpedo reload reduction buff from 10% to 15%. These are a lot of changes and tweaks, and I know I threw a lot of them at you at the same time. We broke it up a little more last time, but in some of which I feel like they were needed, and some of them are still a little puzzled by. The one that stood out to me was the Yamato one. Like Yamato, the module was basically was replacing the reload one that we often use. It was giving you a little more accuracy at the penalty of having some gun traverse penalty. Now you actually have to give up some of the reload bonus that you would have otherwise had and take the penalty to your traverse in response for a little bit more accuracy that I have a hard time actually discerning. But I guess, did any of these other ones stand out to you guys? And what are you looking forward to about these legendary upgrades now that we're going to be getting them via missions?
I find it interesting that there's a legendary upgrade that gives you 10% fighter HP when there is a normal upgrade that gives you 20%. I know it's in addition to that, but still, somebody's going to complain about it, so I'll do it first. I think the Hakuryu fighter upgrade is still a bad idea because it's objectively the better choice if you're fighting Midway. So I don't think the nerf one there is actually going to make much of a difference. The only way it'll make a big enough difference is if the upgrade becomes so low that it doesn't matter. Most of these changes, though, I think the Destroyer ones, Yueyang and Z52, they don't matter because the problem isn't the negative of the on Yueyang, it's the slot that takes, and Z52 as well. You would have to buff the torpedo reload to some obscene levels to give up the concealment for this, and in my opinion, it's quite not worth it. Although I'm sure some people are going to have a lot of fun with it. Yamato, on the other hand, I feel like because it's now a trade-off and you get less turret traverse, I don't think it's worth it. Montana might be interesting, though. We'll see about that one.
Vanessa, how about you? Did any of these stand out to you? And I guess one of the things that maybe Gray can talk about in a minute is, as a former player, Gray, what are your feelings about these legendary upgrades at all? And, would you have rather have seen them kind of tweak the ships in general rather than provide a different upgrade?
Honestly, I don't really care for these legendary modules. They don't excite me. I don't really care for them. I feel like if you're going to make changes or adjustments to these ships, then just balance the ships. I don't come out with these crazy modules that I feel are not good for the game. I don't like them. I don't feel like, oh, yay, it's a quote unquote legendary module that I really want to go out and get. Even if we have these missions or something, it doesn't like really interest me, or generates a level of excitement to want to go out there and do this and earn this for these ships. Almost all the ships that I play, the modules, in my opinion, are crap. I don't really care for them. And so that's my opinion on it. I don't really like them.
I think you probably not the only player who's kind of not bothered by them at all. There's going to be players, however, who like certain ships and certain characteristics, and these are going to appeal to. From my conversations with the guys in the dev team, I was present obviously in the Q&A, and the questions that I fielded and the answers that I've gotten, the thinking, if it helps you guys to sort of come to grips in terms with why these were even introduced, is you mentioned there, Kellorn, about why don't you just tweak or balance the ship. That's kind of not the point here and not the spirit of these legendary upgrades. So you've got the missions, which give you another layer of content, another layer of engagement, another way to spend your time in the game if you don't want to just do the normal randoms. And you then get a reward for that time spent. And in this case, you get the legendary upgrade, and as has been highlighted, in a positive and a negative way, you can trade off. It creates for players kind of what they were asking for with the captain skills and consumables to a degree, where more variation, more adaptability. How can I tweak and hone my ship into a specific build whereby I can diversify the gameplay or the rewards to how I want it? So it's a very small step in adjusting and tweaking the player's experience more to their liking. It's not going to appeal to everybody, and of course, when you do this, you can't make wide-ranging changes that then make a ship wildly strong in one area. So that then kind of explains why they are small buffs, not massive, and also why these small buffs come at a cost. This is probably highlighted most of all with CVs at present. Obviously, they're due to a rework, and they were included with these legendary upgrades because, well, why not? There are some of the competitive players might be scratching their heads, thinking, why the heck would you ever want to mount this upgrade, for instance? And it's purely for choice. Just certain players will like certain things, and if they like striking with torpedoes, they will obviously therefore choose that upgrade, even though they might lose the domination or the air superiority. It's simply tailoring an experience to the player's preference.
So, Gray, we've had some other things in the past where we were offered a fair amount of choices, and kind of the one that sticks in my mind is the previous upgrades, the special upgrades that were, like radar and hydro and things like that. And some of them were good choices and got used, and we really liked them. And then there was a whole range of them that we were like, why did this even get made? Nobody uses it. So is this going to be kind of an experiment in like seeing which ones of these get used, or do they kind of expect the overall utilization of these new legendary upgrades to be pretty low just across the board?
I'm not sure how much expectation really exists in how these legendary upgrades are employed. The best kind of reference I can sort of give is similar to the captain skill tree when it was introduced. We had a whole range of skills. Some of them you might look at quite cross-eyed, going, why would you ever choose this? Other people then came along and extolled the virtues of this particular thing, RFD being one such thing. And then people set trends, and then people then follow suit. And it's kind of an ongoing experimentation. We now have the point where even the captain skill tree seems, in some people's views, I know Knots has been sometimes a bit of a critic there, that it's stagnated, that you only ever pick a certain build and there's no sort of variation. And maybe that will happen again with legendary upgrades, or they won't be adopted. And in that case, well, they may then undergo further changes. And I'm only speculating here, just simply as a sort of matter of course. I can't speak for the devs at this point, but it's always going to be a sort of evolution, if you will.
Clearly, if the captain skill tree doesn't look like the skill tree in Path of Exile, then there is just no choice, right? Okay, so I wanted to talk about the special upgrades. I actually disagree. I think the special upgrades were quite nice because basically all of them actually do something. I would say the only one that might not be used is Damage Control Party, the one that makes Damage Control Party longer. But even that one might actually be useful. We might just not have figured out where it would be better than the alternatives, because you do use the spotting aircraft on some ships.
Actually, Aaron, some Montana players that I know use that one to have just a retardedly long damage control on their Montana.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. I mean, some ships use the spotting aircraft one, some use engine boost, some use defensive fire, some use the hydro one, some use the radar one, and some, a certain submarine uses the smoke generator one. So I think that all of the special upgrades are actually used.
I stand corrected then. So I think that we'll kind of get a better feel for how these legendary upgrades get used in the coming weeks, especially when we learn kind of what it's going to take to unlock them, because that's still a bit in the dark, and we still all we really know is that there's going to be something to do with missions, which kind of surprises me. I was expecting them to be available in the arsenal, so we'll see. Clan Wars Season 3 starts June 30th and will be very similar to the previous two seasons. It will have a 7v7 Tier 10 format with 5 leagues: Squall, Gale, Storm, Typhoon, and Hurricane. Steel rewards will be gained as you progress, but it's unclear how that will exactly work. For each of your previous Stalingrad flags earned, players have been awarded 6,000 steel in their arsenal already. This is important, if you want to buy Stalingrad, which will be released in patch 078, do not spend your steel. You have been warned. The maps for Clan Wars will be Hotspot, Sea of Fortune, Warrior's Path, Mountain Range, Tears of the Player Base, Desert, and Sleeping Giant, after which this season is named. Of these, Hotspot, Mountain Range, and Sleeping Giant have undergone slight map changes in this patch with some interesting implications for tactics, particularly on Hotspot, which has some of the islands in the sea cap changed, and Sleeping Giant, which has some of the islands on the north side of the map significantly altered. We were kind of expecting something different than the prime time method of Clan Wars, which had its time slightly tweaked for this season, but it still exists as a part of Clan Wars. I guess, were you guys expecting more changes from this season of Clan Wars? I know that for a long time we were actually expecting this to be a 2 battleship Clan Wars season, and when the official announcement came down, we're back to 1.
I like how there's a carrier icon on the map when you can check the changes. And there's actually 10 ships rather than 7. You have to actually look at the pictures to find where the clan spawns are. that makes looking at the image quite difficult. But I like the hotspot changes. They, in my opinion, they make the sea cap more balanced, I suppose. Overall, though, I was thinking that it would also be a 2 battleship season. I guess they changed their mind.
Gray, do you have any background on why they changed their mind about the 2 battleship season?
No, I don't at this point have any sort of grounds that we used to justify it, or any feedback that was gained to warrant sticking with one battleship. I have to admit that clan battles for me, I've always treated like team battles. So I've always jumped in with my clan and just had some good evenings of fun. So I've never really sort of studied all the ins and outs of it. Obviously, the half an hour time difference, I hope and believe, is going to help people across the board in enjoying the game. But back to the number of battleships, again, I think you've got to kind of look at it as it's going to be something that is going to be measured, and the response is going to be taken from the player base, and it's kind of going to be tweaked. And obviously we want it to be as best as they can. So just sort of let's see how it rolls and see how it goes.
So I guess one question that is kind of rolling about in the back of my head, not necessarily for this season, but for season 4, is season 4 will see the first time that we see the ability of clans to use their Stalingrads, because they'll be out as of 078. If season 4 continues with the 1 battleship meta, Arun, will Stalingrad be an option or a desirable option for teams that want to have that punch of a second battleship?
I was actually thinking of the same thing earlier when we were talking about Alaska, that if there's maybe too many of these kinds of ships, won't they simply just make the cruisers the battleship, so to say? And I don't actually know the answer to that. There's a lot of strategy that goes on, and tier 10 cruisers are actually quite powerful, so they might not get replaced by, a mini battleship, so to say.
Vanessa, how about you? What are your feelings? I know that you were kind of hoping for something different than the prime time so that you could actually play in this season. Where are you at with Clan Wars in general? And maybe you have any thoughts on the idea of Stalingrad in season 4?
To borrow a use of euphemism from Kami Samurai, what's clan battles? Oh yeah, game mode I can't participate in. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Stalingrad, maybe there's potential there. I mean, some of the iterations that we tested were, in my opinion, OP. I know other community contributors have talked about how great it is. Others have talked about how horrible it is. So honestly, it's going to have to be a wait and see on how the meta kind of shapes out. If in the future we're looking at still 1 battleship, and we're looking at the possibilities of Alaska and Stalingrad there kind of fulfilling that proto battleship role, maybe. And, you've got an actual battleship and then the other trying to flank, with the rest of your team. I mean, there could be some interesting setups there, but I think it's still predominantly going to be, the heavy cruiser fest. And just, I don't see many changes there. Maybe we'll see. It just has to see how things actually perform in the wild.
So as mentioned earlier, the Arsenal was released with this patch, and players were awarded coal in proportion to their oil contributions to all their clans. To earn more coal in the future, there will be missions, crates, challenges, and other ways to earn coal on a daily basis. Save up and buy the things that you want, which I actually think is a really cool way to get things like the flags and camos and things that you may be desiring. Gray, can you give us some background on how the Arsenal came to be and what the reasoning is that it was made in the first place?
Yeah, certainly. I've looked into it a little bit. It's pretty much another way of, I guess, engaging players fundamentally. So you get your coal not just from the usual crates and stuff. You've got a number of ways of earning this coal, of accruing it. Obviously we had oil, and then you could look at that as kind of a bit of a prototype or a basis. Remember that with this sort of evolution, sometimes we wargaming is sort of looking at things and looking at ideas and how you can build upon it. So that's got to be understood. So with this, you're kind of seeing the next level where players can earn a currency. Let's call it, obviously in this instance, coal. You play the game a lot, you earn this currency, but instead of relying on trying your luck on containers to just get some flags of which you've got no control, here you've now got a method, in the instance of flags specifically, where you can choose a bundle or a package and you can kind of air quotes buy it, so you can exchange those resources that your time has helped you accrue for something that you actually want. So it's more of a rewarding experience for that investment of time.
Vanessa, Arun, did you guys have any worries about this, having this system in the game, or are you kind of find this to be all positive for warships in general?
I think it's a good change, although my worry is, will Santa give us coal this Christmas?
I thought about that too.
Wow. I hadn't gotten
buy
there. That's
boxes
funny.
and crates of coal. Fantastic.
Yep. No, I think it's a positive thing. I think when developers help give you a deterministic way to get some things in the game that you want, I feel that's almost always a good thing. So there's a lot of signals, particularly that a lot of people love. And, I know I've complained to this off and on about getting super containers when all I want is my signals. And it's like, I don't want 50 Ocean Soul camos, or money or free XP. I just want my signals. I need my signals. And I know I've gotten so mad and gone, and I'm sure you've seen me there, in chat, like, wishing that, why did I get a stupid super container when all I want is signals? And for me, this is going to be great. We go into ranked seasons, and a lot of us just, we crave those detonation flags or signals. So this is really going to help, those people who really want to stock up on that, to get ready for the next, types of competitive events and stuff where you need those certain signals, that are really critical.
No doubts there. So part of patch 0.7.6 was a wave of buffs, nerfs, and game adjustments, a few of which I'd like to cover here. Namely, Pan-Asian Smoke reload was reduced from 150 seconds to 120 seconds. Rune and Hindenburg had their reload time increased from 10 to 11 seconds. Moskva got bow armor that was increased from 25 millimeters to 50 millimeters. And the Surveillance Radar Mod 1 was nerfed from 40% duration to 20% for a duration increase, It should also be noted that the previously discussed 12-kilometer torps for Zhao, Fletcher torp option for Gearing, and repair party for Grozovoy were rolled out with 0.7.6 as well. I guess, where are you guys at with these game adjustments, and are there any that kind of give you pause?
Radar nerf, yes, please.
Buff to Moscow, which was already like, okay, whatever.
I guess the Moscow one is one that I have probably the most problems with. There are no other ships in the game. Well, I guess that's not exactly true, but there are 50 millimeter plates on the bow of Grosser Kurfürst, but there are no other cruisers in the game that mount a 50 millimeter bow that is literally immune to any ship, any ship shooting out of the game with the angles that they're going to go at. I guess my concern is that you've now solidified the bow-in mentality of Moskvas and given them every reason in the world to do that. And just is that a type of gameplay that we want to encourage?
Short answer, no, but yeah.
I would like it if we went back to the old American cruiser raised citadel, so that now Moskva replaces battleships as the ship that hunts everything, because you can go bow in and the battleship can't do anything to you. Meanwhile, you can citadel them. Going to be fun in the Yamato.
Gray, what did Did any of this get discussed around the office about the idea of kind of promoting the bow-in mentality for Moskva?
Unfortunately, my exposure to certainly this particular change was reading about it in the patch notes. With the sort of department I'm in, I kind of hear back about the changes after they're proposed, less so about the thinking that goes in behind them. I do get some of them, so I can comment on some of the other changes that you've mentioned. Specifically this one, I don't know what the metrics, what the statistics that were studied and used that called for this change to be made. So unfortunately, I can't comment on this one.
Most of the other ones I don't really have a problem with. Especially a lot of people have come to me asking about the Hindenburg and Rune kind of nerf, quote unquote. But those ships have really been overperforming for a long, long time. And this nerf is really not going to be one that you're going to feel, at least not significantly, in my opinion.
Yeah, you've hit the nail pretty much on the head. The Pan-Asians, as we know, they were super effective with that smoke. It was, even when I played them, it sometimes surprised me that my smoke was back up and running. And I did feel that perhaps, certainly when you're running premium and all the other skills and buffs, I don't think you're really going to notice it. When you're in the thick of action and you're doing your destroyer role, I don't think you're really going to feel that change too hard. Nor, as you've just said, do I really think that extra second is going to hurt you too much in your Rune or Hindenburg. And your DPM output, I don't believe is going to be hurt. For you as a player, I don't think you're going to suddenly go from ridiculous damage games to struggling. But of course, it will have an effect across the board, and the intended effect, which is just to slightly dampen the overall versatility of certainly Hindenburg. I think Hindenburg being a sort of number one choice, despite statistically, when I checked and compared Hindenburg to the other ships, it kind of actually lags behind them in many aspects, and yet still, because of that perceived versatility through its tankiness and all these other factors, is just held in such high regard and is performing so very well, which obviously prompts these changes. The radar mod is, again, self-explanatory. It was at 40% deemed too much, so it's been changed to 20% to see how that affects it. It may be that some people think that it's not worth mounting if it's just 20%, but these are certain things that we can't know and how they fit in the sort of ecosystem of World of Warships.
First of all, I think Rune nerf is absolutely undeserved. Rune should never be nerfed. But actually, on the topic of Hindenburg, I think the change is going to be somewhat significant. Not something you'll notice, like you said, but if you actually run the numbers, the Hindenburg ended up being the second highest fire starter after the Des Moines at tier 10, although I guess the Worcester now changes that one too. But basically, the Hindenburg's fast reload and the number of guns put it quite high up there in terms of fire starting capability and DPM. Now it's going to be less so, but I do think that's actually a good thing because Hindenburg just seemed too powerful. I'm going to disagree on the Pan-Asia destroyer change, though, because one of the greatest things about that is that if you went with lots of, you got your premium smoke and all those things, you could almost perma-smoke. I think almost, not quite. And there being a 30-second difference now is going to be something people are definitely going to notice quite hard, because it'll mean that they can't play the same way as they did before, which I think might be a good thing, but, it's definitely a change they'll notice.
Yeah, I agree. Totally should not nerf Rune. Rune needs buffs. The 1 second difference, I don't think people are really going to see too much of a difference on it. Now, the Pan-Asian destroyers, yes, people are going to feel that. But I think it will just take a slight adjustment. What I'm actually kind of surprised, and though I am happy about, is the adjustments with the radar module. But I'm wondering if they're going to make slight changes because there are people who utilize that, especially for the Pan-Asian destroyers who take radar. And so that makes it really difficult to try and do that playstyle because that radar duration is short already with those destroyers. So I'm wondering if Wargaming might actually adjust their base radar because of that change, because of that maybe unattended consequence of trying to nerf the radar modules for cruisers.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that one rolls out. But I honestly feel like the smoke nerf for Pan-Asian DDs is something that needed to happen. They were a little too smoky, and in my personal opinion. But that said, you should note that, as we kind of alluded to earlier in the podcast, that we just before we started recording, we received Kitakaze, Harugumo, and Nuevo de Julio, as well as a new version of Cossack in our ports to test. We will have more information about how these ships work and how they play next week, after we have a chance to play them a little bit more. Before we wrap up, the June giveaway will be starting today. Check the podcast episode for a link to the sign-up website that we have used before around Promo Simple. Guys, did you have anything to throw in before we wrap it up for the day? And I wanted to thank you again, Gray, for joining us today. It was great to get to have you now that you're in your official capacity.
Yeah, I'll just say thank you very much indeed for having me again, having me in the past, and certainly this time. It's going to take some adapting to being in this role and obviously participating in this podcast. It's on the one hand, obviously I've got my role here at Wargaming. I've got my role as a player that I also want to share my opinions of, maybe a little bit hobbled slightly by I want to say like that chocolate factory syndrome. So it's kind of a bit of a paradox where I'm where I've always dreamed of being, but it comes at a price where you've got to tread carefully in order to preserve it. But I hope to be of service to you as community contributors, to your community as well. I'd like to remind everyone listening that if you have any questions, feel free to try and poke me on Discords or any other methods through the normal channels, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that I can. But thank you all. Thank you, Arun. Thank you, Venisari, for having me on here.
I actually have a question right now.
Ooh, fire
what
away.
Can we blame on you in the future?
You personally and all the other contributors can blame me perhaps for late crediting of ships. That's about it. I'm going to leave that on that one, because if you want your giveaway crates, you've got to contact me, and that's on you. But you can definitely hold me accountable for any mistakes that I make. I'll hold my hands up to those.
And we'll just get you to fall on a bunch of dev swords, right?
Absolutely. I'm the front man for that, so I can take the hit for them if needed.
Arun, Vanessa, did you guys have anything to add for today?
Nope.
No, and thank you everyone for listening and your support, as always.
Well, that's it for this week, folks. As always, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Warships Podcast and Twitter at Warships Podcast for updates between episodes. Don't forget to check out Arun on YouTube and Twitch as well. If you're looking for some podcast swag, we've started up a store on Spreadshirt.com that offers podcast branded shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, mouse pads, and other cool things. The URL is shop.spreadshirt.com/Warships Podcast. We, of course, want to thank our amazing Patreon backers. If you're interested in supporting us, please consider becoming a backer yourself. Backers do get access to some special giveaways, one of which will be coming this weekend. Take care, everyone, and we will see you next week.